What's your name, boy?
Hugo. Hugo Cabret.
And when I was working on the invention of Hugo Cabret, and I realized I was telling a story that had a lot to do with the early history of cinema, I thought it might be interesting to tell a story sort of like a movie, and thinking about zooming in and panning and editing. And I realized that what happens in a movie is very related to what happens in picture books for little kids, where you turn the page, and every time you turn the page, the scene changes or something new is revealed. And I thought there might be a way to use everything I learned from making picture books in a way to make a 530-page picture book. I mean, in a way, that's sort of what the invention of Hugo Cabret is.
Who built him?
I would think a magician. The most complicated one I've ever seen.
Can we fix him?
Of course we can fix it.
Right before I started working on the book, my dad died. And I realized, like, oh, I don't want to kill Hugo's dad because I just went through that. And it was, of course, it was horrible and really sad. And I worked on the book for like a year before I realized, oh, in order for this story to work, his dad's got to die. And that became the core of the entire story. And I didn't know that until I realized that his dad had to die. I never would have thought of Martin Scorsese for making this into a movie if someone had asked me. But as soon as I heard the name, I realized, you know, not only is he one of the most genius, brilliant movie directors of all time, but he's a film scholar. And no one knows old movies better than he does. His movies themselves are filled with references to the history of cinema. And so after that initial shock of hearing his name, I suddenly realized, oh, there's nobody else who could make this movie, because the book is filled with references to old movies. There's the actual film stills of George Méliès's movies, but my drawings actually are filled with hidden references to French movies from the early history of cinema. And of course, he would have gotten all of those references that I drew. And I thought, he's the person to make it.
Right after my father died, I'd come up here a lot. I'd imagine the whole world was one big machine.
I visited the set several times. I was mostly filmed in London. They built a full-scale train station from scratch. And everywhere I looked, it was clear that the drawings that I did in the book served as the inspiration for what they made. And I walked into this train station and I couldn't believe it. And in the wall was this metal grate that I drew in the book that Hugo sneaks through to go hide in the walls. And it's a metal grate that doesn't exist anywhere. I made it up out of my head. And there it was, in the wall, like made out of metal, on a hinge. And I said, Dante, I said, that looks just like the metal grate that I drew. And he said, that is the metal grate that you drew. It's exactly the metal grate. And he based it exactly on what I did. And it was all done with this real respect for the original work. The crew on the movie said that they've never seen a director be more faithful to the source material before.
Once upon a time, I met a boy named Hugo Cabret. He searched to find a secret message.
I need to know what this means.
When I saw the movie, you know, it was so far beyond anything I could have imagined, because he's such a genius. It was really amazing seeing how my story, which was created as a book, and my book is a homage, is a celebration of the cinema, but ultimately it's about the beauty of bookmaking, and the book itself becomes a part of the plot at the end of the story. So the book you're holding becomes part of the story. So I thought in the beginning it was literally unfilmable because of the fact that the book is part of the story. But the beautiful magic trick that Scorsese has done is that he's taken that original story that I wrote and made it into something that feels like it absolutely has to be a movie, could only be told as a movie.
Happy endings only happen in the movies.
The story's not over yet.